April 26th, 2023. Honkai Star Rail releases worldwide. At that point, many things were different, far different than what we have come to see of the game today. Certain mechanics that were once unavailable were added, and some mechanics were entirely taken out. I don't think I'll ever forget the odd charm of version 1's jank, but now, 3 years later, we as Kalis, or Stel, depending on your choice, have been through so much of this wondrous universe, and have explored and uncovered many of its secrets. And with each little bit of lore we uncover, each trail we blaze, we discover more and more about ourselves, how we started off with the Stellaron Hunters, and how we find ourselves on this adventure through the stars. How by being forced to let go of our past, we were able to attain so much more. Hello everyone, my name is King Kosuke, and welcome back to the channel. Those who have been around for a while know just how much I love to take a look at games that speak to the aspects of the self or tackle pressing social issues. And though I have made many videos on Hoyo games in the past, it is the first time I am doing something like this for a Hoyo game. Those who are new, I kind of have to do this little intro bit, as I am a variety content channel. These aren't the only kinds of videos I do. I do everything from breakdowns on Persona, though I suppose now that I'm doing this video, I can say I do breakdowns on games in general. I do VR chat trolling, Minecraft VR, and even videos on other games. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, please check all those videos out. And if you happen to enjoy what you see here today, please like and subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified of when I upload next. If you really want to go the extra mile, consider putting that hype feature to use. It helps a lot and really gets my videos into the algorithm. Also, remember to comment. I'd really love to get a discussion going, so please do share your thoughts. And with all that being said, let's get into the first lesson Honkai Star Rail taught us that we forgot. Though it's been a very long time, I'm sure we all remember how our adventure started. Kafka and Silverwolf infiltrate Herta space station in the midst of an antimatter legion attack, find our Stellaron, and shove said Stellaron right into our chest, at which point we wake up, Mother Kafka tells us to be good and eat our greens, and we pass back out for the members of the Astral Express crew to find. Now, although it seems like I'm being way too quick, there's already a lot to unpack here. Knowing what we know now about our chosen Trailblazers past, this scene hits a lot harder. At first, this was simply our introduction to key members of a group that would set up the story and be important through the game. Now it becomes the comrades we once allied ourselves with, for one reason or the next, going through an attack to find the Stellaron that we would act as the vessel for, so that we can begin a prophecy we know pretty much next to nothing about. And the contents of that prophecy involve us breaking through Destiny's set chains, discovering more about ourselves, and embarking on an adventure we otherwise might not be prepared for. Yet in that, we don't really have a choice. And here's where I make my first big, and maybe stupid claim, but with my viewpoint on it all, I think it makes sense. Us, the Trailblazer, with our minds wiped, have a Stellaron forced into us so that we can begin our journey. I believe that the Stellaron here in this case, and in many other cases through the events of the game, represents the future. We are literally having the future forced upon us, and I think that is the core of the first lesson, and arguably the most important lesson, HSR attempts to teach. The future and how we react to it, and the concept of letting go of the past to walk into the future, even when it's one that seems frightening. And that will be the center topic of this video, as obvious by the thumbnail. How these first events not only set up the rest of the game, but also set up every other concept the game portrays. While the waking up with no memories bit is a common trope in most RPG video games, for the Trailblazer, especially in this context, it means so much more. Now we understand that Kalis, or Stel, had a life before this. We were part of the Stellaron Hunters. We had a family. We had a place there, and we were looked at fondly. We experienced things with them and built memories with them, but somewhere along the way, Elio's script decided that our stay was temporary. Maybe we were told, maybe we weren't. But either way, that life we had built was erased from our minds. And assumedly, parts of ourselves too. Though it seems that the Trailblazer did keep his or her core aspects. No matter the case, our memories were wiped, and we were brought into Herta space station to act as the vessel for a Stellaron. The vessel for the future. And in order for us to properly house it, we needed to abandon our old place, our old connections. Now that the Trailblazer is starting to become their own character as of recent updates, and we get to see their personality, it is likely that part of this personality was once present in the person they once were. And if that's true, then I doubt the Trailblazer would have been able to leave their past behind like that. Stellarons feed off of strong desires, and if the Trailblazer was left with even the smallest shred of wanting, it could have cascaded into something else entirely. And it is for that reason that our memories being wiped is so important. because no chance of failure could be afforded. If something had gone wrong, the entirety of the universe could have been put at risk, and so to avoid that, we were left a husk, with barely any recollection to speak of. And with the last few words she had left with us, the person who canonically acted as our mother told us to forget about our past life and venture the universe on a grand adventure to experience many things. Kafka told us to move on, a concept that can sometimes be heartbreaking, no matter how or why. Moving on is often a very difficult, very somber task. Sometimes you have a choice in the matter, sometimes, even oftentimes actually, we don't, and we just have to accept it and move forwards. And to do that is an extremely difficult and trying task, but more often than not, it is always rewarding in the end, even if it takes many years, many hardships, and many trips and falls. And HSR shows us this by the promise of a grand journey. Kafka herself states it to us before sending us on our way, telling us, quote, "In the near future, you will encounter all kinds of perils and hardships, but you will also have many wonderful experiences. You'll meet with companions who treat you like family and embark on surreal adventures with them." She outright tells us that not only will we go on amazing adventures, but we will also encounter struggle and amazing found family to help us through that struggle. And for just a moment, I want to pan to Kafka's view. Despite her demeanor, we are now certain that Kafka cared about us very deeply, and that our bond with her was very much like a mother and her child. So this woman who raised us and taught us so much, who alone holds all manner of memories that we do not, is now forced to abandon what is essentially her child on the space station, with the single promise to them and to herself that they will be in safe hands. And thankfully, she turns out to be right. Although there is that one option, ultimately the Trailblazer opts to join the Astral Express and take the journey. Still though, we pan back to that topic of moving on and embracing the future. We still don't have the full picture about our past, and it will likely take many more updates for things to be revealed. But still, Kafka knows, even if we don't. She remembers the person we once were. She most likely even misses us. But in her own words, she is incredibly happy that we've acclimated to our new home so well, and that we've managed to make such long-lasting memories. Moving on and embracing the future always has two sides to it. How the past will remember you, and how you will remember the past. Though in this case, our Trailblazer doesn't remember much of it at all. However, I'd still find it an important aspect to cover. The concepts of moving on, embracing change, and still making the best out of it all are still incredibly important footnotes to cover, even if to some extent it doesn't fully apply to the Trailblazer. Though part of me thinks that isn't entirely fair to say, the more we begin to uncover about our past, the more those memories pop up, and the more we see the Trailblazer mellow out around their past companions, going from incredibly standoffish to almost hesitant. Like a part of them has begun to miss their comrades. Yet even so, they remain steadfast by the Astral Express, and in the future, I feel as if we will be forced to pick a side. Maybe it's a long shot, but I truly could see a dilemma like that occurring. The choice between finally figuring out who we are and staying by our new future despite all we know, or discovering our past and growing attached to that person we once were and abandoning all we've done to rejoin our Stellaron Hunter past. Again, maybe it's a stretch, but I don't think that's unbelievable. Still, the point remains. Even if we've lost our memories, now that we have begun to regain them, we revisit that prior statement I made. Moving on and embracing the future always has two sides. How the past will remember you, and how you will remember the past. After encountering the Stellaron Hunters time and time again, and after our interactions with Firefly during Penacony, we come to learn about how our past remembers us. And like stated prior, it remembers us very fondly. And through those same interactions, as we uncover more about ourselves, we come to understand our fondness for them. Even during the beginning of our story so long ago, there's a text conversation to be had with Kafka where the Trailblazer can openly admit to missing Kafka. And if I'm being so honest, I really like that dialogue tree, especially for the point of the game that it's at, because in my opinion, it gives the Trailblazer a bit more humanity towards the start of the game. Again, as of recent updates, they have begun to move further and further away from the self-insert protagonist type. Though in my opinion, the Trailblazer has always kind of had a personality of their own, but that's a debate for another day. Either way, that line of dialogue shows us that to some extent, the Trailblazer still remembers bits and pieces, which makes their continued stay that much harder, especially at the start of our journey. A point where we still don't quite know where we are, and we find ourselves thrusted into this new adventure. And though we made the choice to take the journey and board the train, our choices were between that and a lifetime of study as Herta's guinea pig. So it really just seems like we went with the option that granted us the most freedom. Even if Herta still experiments on us, at the very least she rewards us for it. Still, I want to try and explore that idea, the difficulty of choice, the potential sleepless nights that the Trailblazers suffered through, wondering about who they could have been or who they were at one point, maybe even trying to confide in Dan Heng, who they would have shared similarities with. I feel like in some way that is something a lot of us could find ourselves in. And don't think I've forgotten about Dan Heng, how the entirety of the first arc of his character is literally about moving on from the past. I'll get to him eventually, but I want to keep going with the Trailblazer just a little longer, as they are, well, you know, us. Plus, there are many similarities between Dan Heng's story and the story of the Trailblazer, so I think exploring both avenues simultaneously is fair. But before I continue on with that, I want to take a second to summarize the point thus far. In both the story of the Trailblazer and the first arc of Dan Heng's story, Honkai Star Rail teaches us the values of moving on from the past, willingly or unwillingly. And I think that is the underlying beauty of Dan Heng and the Trailblazer. Such similarities that differ ever so slightly, just like how we as people can find similarities in a mutual situation, often caused by a need to shift for the sake of the future. And how cruel and sudden it can be in its whims, giving us very little time and very little options. But even when it rushes us along, just like Dan Heng and the Trailblazer, we can make the most out of a situation that is forced upon us. Even Kafka herself states that our journey won't be all joy and whimsy. We will experience hardship, we will go through struggle, and it is that struggle that makes it all worth it, that makes everything mean something. Everything we go through as a nameless alongside our fellow nameless gives that title its meaning, and without those struggles and battles, the title would mean nothing. To explore, understand, establish, and connect takes going through tough spots. It takes bravery in the face of almost certain failure. But as of Amphorius, we also know that the Oath has one more tenet in it: salvation. That even through all woes, we as nameless still vow to be good people and remain as a beacon that others can rely on. And that is also another incredibly important piece, because oftentimes the bitterness of moving on can change us for the worse if we lose sight of our own good nature, but it doesn't need to be like that at all. Yes, we can allow ourselves to grow bitter and resentful, but we can also use that struggle to temper ourselves and grow into better people. Even in the most bitter change, we can still use that as an opportunity to be kind, even when the past that forced us to move on isn't. Maybe you're moving on from an ex-lover, maybe a friend or a group of friends, maybe it's a job or family, or any situation where you weren't treated properly. Just because you now find yourself out of that place doesn't mean you should lose heart or cast someone else into that same suffering. Those horrible things can be used to empower yourself and others, and living through those things doesn't take away from your value. In fact, it adds to it. Those lived experiences that we go through don't make us weak just because we couldn't stick with them. It makes us stronger because we realized we deserved more than what we were being given. And although that strays from the concept of how Kalis or Stell had to move on, I still wanted to explore the more realistic situations the future will often throw at us as a message to move forward. Although in their own way what the Trailblazer goes through is still very real. Sometimes we don't want to move on because we like the place that we're in, but the future simply tells us that our time in that place or with those people is up. And although it sucks to realize, that is a dilemma that can hurt just as much as moving on from a place we hate. And oftentimes we will try to cling to that goodness as much as we can, even as it begins to fade away. When the time comes for something to conclude, we simply have to close the chapter and allow a new one to open. Because that new chapter will give us the choices to make something even better than what we had. And don't get me wrong, just as it gives us the choice to make things better, it also gives us the choices to make things worse. But therein lies the key word: choices. We still get a say. We ultimately decide where we go after the dust settles. And in all that lies the full perspective of the big first lesson, how we as people choose to move on when the future calls on us to do so, and how we allow the things that we experience through that process of moving on to change us. Honkai Star Rail is a game all about our choices, and so it makes the most sense that its first lesson is on how we allow our past and future to mold us, and how we can come out of it better than when we first went in. Because at the end of all that struggle, we may just be able to look back and realize that the journey we underwent granted us the permanence of belonging and stories to share about the trails we blazed with our own hands, alongside a found family all our own. With that being said, I think I'll end off the video here. I get this wasn't really all too formatted and maybe I bounced around at some points, but I still wanted to make this video. Not only because I thought it would be interesting, but also because I wanted an opportunity to share some thoughts. As said at the beginning, I encourage you all to leave a comment with your own thoughts. I'd love to see your opinions. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.